Coming. My name is Lee Walsh. I'm a master gardener with specialty in native plants and native pollinators. And tonight we're going to talk about invasive species, which is a little bit off topic from that, except that once we remove the invasive species, then there's more room for the native plants. Especially in a wild setting, like I'm going to use Indian Crossing Trails Park as an example. For a lot of this, once these escape into a wild setting, they will literally crowd out the beneficial plants. And once the plant disappears, any native wildlife, whether it's a bird, an insect, or what, that depends on that plant will also disappear. So if you want to support our native insects and birds, we remove the invasive species so we can replace them with the natives that work with the native pollinators and things. So, these are the three questions I'm going to try to answer for you tonight. And if you end up with questions at any point, just stop me and I'll take questions as I go. So, Okay, so as the slide says,
George, it's still there.
Is it?
Will it come off?
Invasive species can be pretty much anything biological. We have the zebra mussel, which you've all probably heard of, the spotted lanternfly, a nutria on the bottom left, and a mute swan on the bottom right. These species are all considered invasive because, one, they're not native to southeast Michigan, and two, because they are aggressive spreaders or aggressive users of habitat, like the swan, and they will either destroy the wetlands or crowd out the native species. We do have a swan that's imperiled because of this mute swan, and the nutria hasn't made it this far north yet because they're originally from South America, but they are working their way up the Mississippi River Valley. So we may eventually have nutria here to contend with. Let's hope not. Okay. And invasive species can also be a plant. Here we have garlic mustard and English ivy and the dreaded Callery pear. We do have at least 2 Callery pears here on church property. They're over there by the parking lot. And the reason Callery pear is a problem is because it sets seed so prolifically that it spreads like crazy. This time of year, it's really interesting to just drive around and look for them. Husband and I drove to Ann Arbor, was that yesterday? And they're all over, and you only notice them when they're in bloom. But they have a distinctive pattern where the blossoms kind of make a little ball, and you can see them across the field where, oh, in that fence row, there's all these Callery pears.
Wait, I'm sorry, I missed it. What was the animal on the slide before this?
The little furry guy is a nutria.
Nutria?
Nutria. They're native to South America.
But they're not in Michigan yet?
No.
Okay.
They were introduced for the fur trade. People were hunting them for their fur around the turn of the 20th century. They're actually the size of a small dog. Okay, so that's not a little thing.
No.
So I can solve that invasive problem. Meat. Just turn it into meat.
Probably tastes like
Hamburger.
chicken, right?
Exactly. Solved.
Well, like I said, they're not here yet. They are present in 18 states, though.
Wow.
So they have spread.
I wonder if they're coming up because of climate change.
Possibly, because it's warmer now than it
Yeah.
used to be. Very likely. Okay, so invasive species are the ones that cause harm. Because we have lots of non-native species in Michigan that are important to our economy or our lifestyle, and most non-native species are not harmful. They cross the line when they cause damage. So many of our fruits, our vegetables, our field crops, our livestock are not native, but they do okay because they're not aggressive spreaders like these ones we label invasive. According to the state of Michigan, invasive species are responsible for $26 billion in economic damage and control efforts each year in the U.S. $26 billion to control and clean up after these guys. So, just to review, native species are the ones that were here before the colonists came. They evolved over thousands of years in southeast Michigan, and they co-evolved with all the birds and insects and other flora, fauna that are here. So they're very interdependent. So when I say a native plant species disappears from an ecosystem, the wildlife depending on it will also disappear. So that's never good. So when it's good that we're planting native species and we're trying to mitigate that kind of harm, but we really need to take care of the invasive species so that the good species are not crowded out. So the geographic origin of a plant is the single most important indicator of its value to an ecosystem. So we're going to talk about lots of species tonight that came from Asia and Europe. So invasive species can also impact food security and water quality. With the zebra mussel, we know that they filter the water so effectively that we have crystal clear water where zebra mussels are present. They're a problem though because the things that they filter out of the water are the food source for lots of other creatures. So, you think, oh, well, they clean up the water, look how clear that is. Well, then the fish don't have anything to eat. And the lanternfly, these guys I'm going to talk about them more in a minute. But these guys are a specific threat to our crops, particularly grapes and apples and hops in Michigan. So it's to our benefit to control them for a lot of reasons. So this guy was just spotted in Michigan in 2022 in Oakland County, and so far it has been detected in Lenawee, Macomb, Monroe, Oakland, and Wayne counties. And in Lenawee, several adult lanternfly were detected at 2 locations more than 7 miles apart. There are confirmed populations in 18 states so far. It was first found in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania has spent literally billions of dollars trying to contain it and to contain its damage. In Michigan, this has the potential to affect about 70 different plant species, the crops that I talked about before, and not just apples and grapes. It will host on all the fruit trees. Those just happen to be its favorite. Some species of hardwood trees as well, which risks our forests. And Tree of Heaven is its native host plant, also from Asia, and Tree of Heaven is here in the US and in Tecumseh specifically. So, if that's its host plant, we need to control the tree in order to control the insect.
Is the difference between the 2 pictures if that's what it looks like with its wings spread and then with its wings closed?
Correct. Yeah, and the male and female look identical.
Okay.
How big is it? 'Cause
I'm glad you asked.
not big.
Not huge, not huge. They're pretty, but that you still need to squish them. And this time of year, before the trees leaf out, is actually the best time to spot the egg masses. You see down there at the bottom, they lay, kind of looks like corduroy, and eggs in a mass, and then they cover it with mud on the side of a tree or any kind of smooth outdoor surface. So you find them on your camper, you find them on your spare tire, you find them on your patio furniture, all those kind of things. So they only have 1 generation per year though, so the best time to catch them is to catch the eggs and then keep the eggs from hatching.
Are they stuck very firmly? Do you have to
Well,
scrape them off?
you scrape them off with something about the consistency of a credit card
Oh, okay.
or a putty knife.
All right.
They're not hard to get off. And we'll talk about what to do with them once you scrape them. Okay. So why is it bad? First of all, it presents a serious threat to our agricultural crops and forests. As discussed, They're also kind of a nuisance because they create a honeydew-like secretion, which then draws sooty mold, and they also attract other pests like yellow jackets and flies and ants, which are after the honeydew. So you have this mass of stuff and different insects going after it. So basically, the lanternfly sucks the liquids out of the plants. All right, so controlling it, the number one way it gets around is by hitchhiking. And these are some of the egg masses, and you can see some of the places where they've been found. Camping equipment, tires, fence posts. So you scrape it off, put it in a Ziploc bag with either hand sanitizer or rubbing alcohol, squish it up real good, seal the bag, and dispose of it in the trash. That's how you get rid of spotted lanternflies. I know there's an infestation of tree of heaven out at north of the rec center. I'm sure there's probably other places in town that have it. But it's on my radar to go out there and check for egg masses, since that's its preferred host plant. Oh, and this is a new thing. There's a detection dog that has been found 3 times more effective than people in finding these insects in wooded areas. So that's hopeful for the future. This is one that Michigan is wanting you to report if you find it, see it, squish it, report it. The address there, the website address is on your resource sheet, so you don't need to copy it down. So if you find it, you have to take a picture of it in order to report it, whether it's eggs or nymphs or adults or what have you. The DNR wants photos.
Is it equivalent to use that missing app?
Not for the spotted lanternfly.
They don't, the
No,
Michigan
they
invasive
have
species
a
information?
page specifically for
Specifically for that, okay.
spotted lanternfly. For the next couple guys we talk about, then we use missins, which I'll talk about when we get there. So while we're on invasive moths, you probably know about the spongy moth. This was formerly known as the gypsy moth until it was renamed to be more culturally sensitive. And the egg masses kind of look spongy, so hence the name. They have been in the U.S. Since 1869, and they first came to Michigan in the mid-1980s. So we've been living with this pest for a while, and people are, the state's getting better at controlling it or knowing what to do. Their big problem here is that instead of sucking the sap out of trees like the spotted lanternfly, these guys, actually it's their hungry caterpillars, will defoliate a tree. They will eat until the tree, all the leaves are gone, which makes the tree vulnerable to other diseases and pests, right? Because it can't feed itself. And these guys feed on hundreds of plant species. They're not nearly as specific as the other moth. So again, the best time to control it is in early spring, when you can find the egg masses easily on bark or other surfaces, and scrape them and treat them the same way that you do the spotted lanternfly. Here though, they're not nearly as pretty as the lanternfly, and the female and the male are a little bit different. The females are white and actually much larger than the male, and then the male is this kind of muddy brown with the zigzag pattern on his back. And these are about the same size as the spotted lanternfly as well, about 1 inch to 1.5 inches long. Because it's a moth, we have the egg stage, the caterpillar stage, the pupa stage, and then the adult stage. It's the caterpillars that really present the biggest problem. So the caterpillar here is pretty gnarly looking. The caterpillars are about 1.5 to 2 inches long, so they're pretty good sized. The pupa you will find probably in the leaf litter at the base of a tree. And of course the egg masses get laid on all the same kind of surfaces that the spotted lanternfly lays its eggs on. So why is it bad? It will defoliate trees. And you can see in this photo here how you see the tops of the trees are completely bare. And it's a summertime photo, those trees shouldn't be bare. So first and foremost, they kill trees. Secondly, they are a nuisance because they poop a lot. They poop a lot, and it goes everywhere. And they're big poops, considering it came out of a caterpillar. And if that wasn't enough, the spines also will irritate your skin if you touch the caterpillars. They especially like oak trees,
That's easy.
which, as you probably know, our oaks are the foundation of all of our ecosystems in Michigan. So they're a threat to the oaks, but they will feed on over 300 different species of trees. Again, the biggest way they get around is hitchhiking on smooth surfaces. And if you find them, you scrape them and get rid of them in the same way. This one gets reported to MISN, which is the Midwest Invasive Species Information Network, which is a great resource if you're researching some of these creatures or just want to report something. Again, they'll want a photo. This is a regional effort to develop and provide early detection and response resources for invasive species. So, you see that reported. Okay. And this is our last insect before we go on to plants. Has anybody encountered these guys here? No?
No.
I have never seen one in person, although some of the research says they are probably widespread in southern Michigan. This is native to Asia, and you notice they look very similar to earthworms with a few key differences. These guys have really been spreading in recent years, and they do think it's tied to climate change because they moved into areas where they weren't before. These were first recorded in Michigan in 2008 in Oakland County. So, like the spotted lanternfly, if it's in Oakland County, we're not that far from it.
Can I ask a question? Why does it seem that there's so many that come from Asia? Is it because we get so much shipped in from Asia?
Pretty much. And it's a big place, Asia.
Yeah.
So here's a neat slide that compares the two. And for me, this band here in the middle of the body is distinctively different on the jumping worm. It's wider and whiter and a little shaped a little different. What grosses me out about this worm is that it has a large, distinct mouth. Right? Large, distinct mouth, where your earthworm does not. So if you can see its mouth, it's probably a jumping worm. Also, the motion of this thing, it will thrash around, which is why it's called a jumping worm. So if you pick up a European earthworm, which are everywhere, they may wiggle a little bit, but this guy really thrashes around, which is one of the key ways to tell them apart, except for the large, distinct mouth. They can be up to 8 inches long, and they overwinter in they overwinter in little cocoons. I've got a picture of those next. So here, why is it bad? They can reproduce without a mate. So that means their populations can increase very quickly. They consume leaf litter, which is the organic layer that supports many different kinds of life, including insects and small reptiles and small mammals. And then they also change the composition of the soil, which will further push out native plants in favor of non-native plants. Yeah, so it, when they're eating the organic layer, it really, in forests, makes it less beneficial for all kinds of creatures, especially the native plants. In lawns and gardens, all they're going to do is maybe destroy your turf. But it's when they get out into the wild that they are really a menace.
Doesn't the European earthworm also consume fodder and, I mean,
They do, but they don't reproduce as rapidly, and they're not as widespread, not as,
and do they have casing, do they make casings?
they make castings. They do.
Just like you would.
Yeah, except they're bigger and more distinctive and almost looks like little pebbles or gravel. It's very distinctive. If you see a pile of castings you don't recognize, that's another clue for these guys. So currently, there's no means of control for them, which means prevention is the best management. So, the penny, you see the little brown things? Those are its cocoons. So you can see how hard that would be to find in whatever setting. I have heard tales of these being passed around at plant swaps. So buyer beware there. I have not ever encountered them personally, but that does not mean they're not out there. You can be safer by only buying bagged soil or mulch and buying your plants only from nurseries. You know, if you're at plant swaps, you might want to take a look at those roots before you take something home. This is another one that they want you to report to Missing. And this link is also on your resource sheet. Questions about bugs before we move on to plants?
Oh, I remember the emerald ash borer being a big thing because it started like near where I used to work up in Plymouth. Is it just because all the ash trees are gone, they're not an issue anymore?
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
They just ate themselves out of business?
Well, they're still out there,
Yeah.
but I didn't want this presentation to go 2 hours
Yeah.
because there's lots of other bugs I can talk about. Don't get me started.
Okay. Just one.
That's cute.
So when we talk about invasive plants, we already touched on the native plant species disappears from the ecosystem, so do the wildlife depending upon it. Why are native plants so successful? Here's a few of the reasons. Longer growing season than natives. If you go out and walk in Indian Crossing Trails Park tomorrow, and you'll see all this green foliage in the understory,
Yeah.
that's all invasive honeysuckle, which greens up before the natives even have leaves. And once you start seeing it, you'll see it everywhere. It's that layer of green in the understory. Those are invasive plants because the natives haven't even got started yet. Many of these have really aggressive root systems or produce large quantities of seeds. Many of them adapt well to disturbed soil. So any place humans have been, we've disturbed the soil, that gives the invasive plants a foothold. Some of them produce chemicals that actually inhibit the growth of other plants around them. But the biggest reason is because humans buy and plant them. So currently, there are over 1,200 invasive plant species in the US. Over 700 of them are still sold every day in nurseries and greenhouses. Michigan is really lax when it comes to that. We don't have any laws about things like English ivy or burning bushes or any of these nursery menaces. So, you know, it's to your own advantage to be educated about what you're buying and what you're putting in your yard. So 50% of the species that states have identified as especially problematic and 20% of federally identified noxious weeds are still being offered for sale. So we're going to talk a little bit about the invasive species being sold in Michigan nurseries. Here are two famous ones. English ivy is from, guess where, England.
Which one? Oh.
And creeping myrtle is from Europe and Asia. The creeping myrtle especially will take over an area in no time at all. If you're familiar with Hidden Lake Gardens, they have, on the Woodland Drive, they have several hillsides that used to be all trilliums, now they're all myrtle. And how do you control acres of it? It's very hard. The leaves are waxy, so you can't just spray it with a poison because that waxy coating protects the leaves. Same thing with English ivy, it's hard to get ahead of it because you can't just spray it. And if you tear it out, the roots will regrow. So both of these things are really nasty to get in control of, and yet people still plant them every day thinking, oh, this is a perfect ground cover for under this tree. And then it escapes out of cultivation. The myrtle in particular is a big threat to wilderness areas, and there's quite a lot of it in Indian Crossing Trails Park. When they landscaped the sculpture garden at the TCA, I was in on the planning of this with Sarah Gilmore, and the contractor, who shall remain nameless, wanted to put in this stuff as a ground cover, and that's like 100 yards from the edge of the forest. And Sarah got them to commit to not using it there because it would be way too easy for that to escape. So, however, there are some good native alternatives. Virginia creeper, if you need a vine, and wild ginger, if you need something for shade. Both of these are native. Both of them provide benefits for either pollinators or other insects. The Virginia creeper is a host for a number of finks moths, and the wild ginger actually has co-evolved with ants. The wild ginger has a little red flower that actually points down, and the ants will come, harvest the seeds, and take them back to their nest. And once they're underground, then those seeds want to sprout, and then you have a new patch of wild ginger. It's pretty durable, but it will not take foot traffic. Whereas Virginia creeper, if you let it crawl across the ground, you can walk on it and it'll just laugh at you. But if there's anything for it to climb up, it does tend to climb. It has little tendrils with adhesive discs, so it's not as destructive as English ivy as far as destroying your siding or trying to, colonize inside your building. I had that happen. It also produces berries for the birds, which is kind of a bonus, and it turns red in the fall, so it's a nice all-around vine. It's got lots of good qualities. The stick teepee that's out here behind the rain garden has got Virginia creeper growing up the backside of it. So once that, couple more weeks, it'll start to show, and that will eventually be covered with, and it'll be a nice shady structure.
I have a question.
Sure.
I've been wanting to put in Virginia creeper for this fence, and I was reading up on it, and it is beautiful. But it said for some people, they have this really bad blistery reaction to it.
I have known one person to have a reaction to it, yeah.
Oh,
I
so
don't
it's
personally do it.
Very rare.
It's pretty rare. Yeah.
And they'd have to probably just really get in it,
Yeah, and the kid that had the reaction to it, it was like, kind of like a sunburn. It wasn't nearly as nasty as poison ivy rash.
Okay.
It wasn't bad. So I if you're gonna get some, maybe handle it, carefully the first time, but chances are it's not gonna bother you. All right, moving on. Couple more invasive species. So we have Japanese barberry and burning bush. Japanese barberry is known for being a host plant for the black-legged tick. This is the tick that transmits Lyme disease. And there is a big infestation of this stuff in Indian Crossing Trails Park.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that's not good. This one is actually banned from sale in about half a dozen states. Michigan is not one of them. Native to Japan, brought over, isn't ornamental. People like the pretty purple color, but it produces berries. Birds eat those berries, and you can't control where the birds go to poop out the berries. Yep. So that's a problem. And if you have it in your yard, I just totally advocate for just taking those out and replacing them with something different. Burning bush is also native to Asia. Same thing, it produces berries, the birds eat the berries, and that's how it spreads. Both of these will form dense thickets if left to their own devices. Forests, fields, roadsides. Both of these can be pulled up by the roots if you have, if it's starting to spread in your yard. You can pull it up when it's small, but when it's bigger, you need to cut it off and then treat the stump with some kind of herbicide. People like these because they're colorful. But I wanted to point out some native alternatives that also turn red in the fall. But they're native, so they won't destroy the forests. They will still support the birds and the insects. They're pretty, and they get red foliage in the fall. If that's what you like, you can do a chokeberry. We got also the maple leaf viburnum, turns red in the fall. And this is a host plant for a little, for the spring azure butterfly even. It's got pretty white flowers, it makes berries. This is more shade tolerant than most viburnums, so it'll take full sun to part shade. And there are other viburnums that I didn't have time and space to go into, but many of them have this red color in the fall. So look into your native viburnums if you're looking for an alternative to burning bush. Moving on. So, oops. What's supposed to happen? Sorry, technologically challenged. So we touched on calorie pair a little bit earlier. And on the left, you can see what looks like, oh, look at all those pretty white trees. Well, until you know what they are, they're pretty. Once you know what they are, they're not so pretty. Because they take over and they push out the beneficial things. The photo on the right is one of the things that calorie pairs are known for, which is they will literally collapse under their own weight. Yeah. So they're not our friend, you know, and you can still buy them all over the place. But a lot of people have buyer's remorse once the tree gets to be mature and then it starts shredding itself.
Our neighbors had one that did that.
These were first imported in 1908, and it was the Bradford cultivar that really became popular. That came over in 1961. These also have thorns, and the flowers smell bad. So why would you plant them? There are a lot here in Tecumseh as street trees, and there's some in front of the A.J. Smith Center. There's a row of about 8 of them. Big mature trees, but they're calorie pairs.
They're pushed by landscape.
Yes, they are. Yeah. So here is a native alternative. The serviceberry blooms at the same time as the calorie pear, but it's native. It turns red in the fall, and it has these blueberry-like fruits that are actually edible by humans, if you can get to them before the birds do. They're very blueberry-like. The tree itself can either have a shrub form with multi-stems, like shown here, or you can train it to grow as a single stem tree. So this is a native, it's very adaptable. It grows to maybe 15 to 25 feet tall and wide. And it's not picky. It likes, you know, full sun to part shade. You'll get more fruit and berries. You'll get more flowers and berries if you put it in sun. But it will tolerate part shade if that's what your location has.
So the saplings that you handed out recently, will they be a tree or a bush?
Depends.
Oh.
They all started out as single stem, but we don't have any control over the rootstock if it decides it wants to send up more shoots or not. If you want it to be single stem, just trim off those shoots. Yeah.
Deer like it though too, don't they?
Lee,
Yeah.
I just want to make a plug for chokeberries. I like to call them aronia berries because when we call them chokeberries, people think that doesn't sound like they would be very edible.
Right.
But I have some out of the farm and I get so many berries out of these shrubs, and I freeze them and I make scones with them, and when you cook with them, they're just like blueberries.
Nice.
When you eat them handfuls, they're pretty, you know, they've got a lot of tannins, but when you cook with them, they're really great. And I understand that they're pretty good with antioxidants too. So, I mean, it's,
Thank you for that.
they just are prolific with their berries. And so I'll give a plug for those. They don't get overly big, and they just cover with berries.
And that's really to our benefit to plant the native things that create berries, whether we're
Yeah.
eating them or the animals are eating.
Yep.
So serviceberry is one of my personal favorites. Here are a couple more that are also native. The redbud and the dogwood.
You can tell that by its bark, right?
Oh, stop.
Yes.
Worse than mine.
Yes, yes.
I got Charlotte with that recently.
Good one, good one. So these are both small trees, maybe 20 to 30 feet tall. Both have flowers in spring. The redbud, you want to buy as small a tree or seedling as possible because it has a taproot that goes straight down as tall as the tree goes up. Which is, you don't want to transplant a big one of those because if it's been grown in a nursery and that taproot has been cut off, you probably will lose the tree. So start with a tiny one, or the smallest one you can find if you want a redbud. I can dig you some up from my yard. Once somebody in the neighborhood has redbuds, pretty much everybody in the neighborhood will have redbuds. But to me, that's a bonus. I like them.
So if you find them actually in a forest or on a hillside in the open, are those different than the ones you get from the nursery?
The ones in the nursery may be a cultivar, where they have taken the native species and hybridized it to either have, brighter pink flowers or maybe, they've hybridized it to have white flowers instead of pink, likely. But many of them in nurseries are the straight species as well. You just really have to read the tags to, again, be an informed consumer. It's a sturdy tree. It doesn't shred itself like the calorie pear does.
It does send out a lot of seed.
Prolific, it's a prolific
Yes,
seeder.
because I have one in the back and one in the front, and I find seeds everywhere.
They grow fast.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
they
they're
do grow
They're
fast.
pretty, but that's nice, if you want a tree that's gonna grow.
So I go around my yard twice a year, spring and fall, and if there are seedlings, I cut them off before they
That's what I
can
do too.
get established.
I'm sorry, let's go back to that. When you have a tree that you don't want, you cut it off?
Yes,
You don't try to pull it out or dig it out, you
Depends on
just
the
cut
tree.
it off?
depends on the
Then
tree.
you treat
With
it.
these red buds, they have a taproot, so you're not gonna be able to get it out.
And you don't do anything with this stump?
Yes, you treat it with herbicide,
You do.
yes.
Do you have a recommended herbicide?
Well, it depends. For most woody shrubs, triclopyr is the active ingredient you want. I can't tell you a brand name because master gardeners aren't allowed to do that. But triclopyr is the brush killer that you can use on woody shrubs or poison ivy. And I've got a picture later on of exactly how you treat a stump once you cut it up. All right, so here is a new thing to control invasive sold by nurseries. This is the Go Beyond Beauty program, which actually started in the Traverse City area and now is in all those shaded areas in the state. Here, the Jackson, Lenawee, Washtenaw, SISMA is administering it. That's the invasive species management area that we belong to. And unfortunately, this doesn't really have any teeth to it. It's a voluntary program, but it's to get nurseries to commit to not selling these nasty things. And that's what the SISMA is for. The SISMA is all about control of invasive species in the Tri-County area, and we have, they have a lot of programs of their own, so they're a good organization to be aware of. So they don't have anything about the Go Beyond Beauty program up on their website or Facebook page yet because it's brand new. But I'm hoping, as it gets established, they'll go around to the nurseries in these counties and hopefully get some to commit to being more responsible sellers. Go Beyond. So this isn't sold in nurseries, but it's still obnoxious. Garlic mustard was brought here in 1868 as a kitchen herb because it tastes like, guess what, garlic and mustard. It's pretty pungent. In fact, when you pull it, you can smell it when you're pulling. It is a prolific reseeder. One plant can produce 10,000 seeds, and those seeds can remain viable for up to 10 years. If you're trying to control a big patch of it, like you see here on the right, the rule is you need to cull 90% of the adult plants every year for 10 years to get ahead of a big infestation like that. So you're really well served to look for the new infestations and wipe it out before it gets started. This is a biennial, so you have 2 chances to kill it before it goes to seed. The first year it comes up and makes a little rosette of leaves like you see on the left. And then in the second season, it puts up flower stalks that then produce all those seeds. If you're harvesting to eat it, be sure to pull up the roots and do everybody a favor while you're harvesting it. People make pesto with this specifically, but there are lots of ways you can eat it if you're so inclined. Foragers love it. I'm not much of a forager. Here's another one that is similar in the places it infests, like garlic mustard. And you see this in the spring, and from a distance, it's very pretty. You know, it's on the edge of a forest, it's pink and purple and white. But this variety is not native. You see on the photo on the left, they've got 4 leaves. And the way I remember that is it's got 4 leaves and Dame has 4 letters in it. It's look-alike. There is a native woodland phlox, but it has 5 petals. And it flowers later in the season than this does. So that's one of the ways you can tell them apart. This is controlled just like garlic mustard in that you want to pull it up before it goes to seed. There's quite a lot of this in Indian Crossing Trails Park too.
Is it only purple?
And it comes in pink, purple, and white. But it's usually a mix like this. One thing about it is it's often in wildflower seed mixes, so you're always you want to always read your labels and make sure that you're not spreading this noxious thing around.
Do we have to get rid of that one? No, really, I'm asking because it's very pretty.
It is very pretty,
And
but it crowds out native things. Like trilliums are pretty, but they won't grow where they've been crowded out. That's our reasoning. Or if you're going to keep it, you go out there when it's done flowering and cut all the seed heads off.
Okay.
In your spare time.
In your spare time. Because that's how you would control it. So both of these plants, you just want to pull them up and bag them. You don't put them in your compost, you don't put them in your yard waste bag, you put them in a bag and dispose of it in the trash. The garlic mustard will continue to set seed even after you pull it up.
Wow.
So you don't want to mess around with it, you just want to get rid of it. So when we're talking about cutting off something woody, like a tree or, shrubs that you don't want, the picture there shows the cut stump treatment where you cut it off and you use your herbicide of choice around the edge, because only the edge of the tree is actually alive.
Yeah.
Like this part here, you really only need to put it on the edge where it will be absorbed. And the reason that is blue is because there's a special dye that you can put in your herbicide for this kind of work so that you can tell where you've been and where you haven't. All right, so I'm going to talk about these woodies, invasive woodies, quickly. Tree of Heaven, as I touched on earlier, is a host plant for our friend the spotted lanternfly. It's also very invasive on its own. It grows really fast, like 10 to 15 feet in 1 year is not unusual. And it will grow just about any place its seed lands. It will grow in cracks in cement. It does not care where it grows. It is also one of those that put out a chemical that will inhibit other seeds from other species from germinating around it. And its flowers smell bad. So, this is not our friend. It will sucker, and pretty soon you'll have like a whole thicket of it. And a female tree produces up to 300,000 seeds per year.
Haven't called and said they don't want this to be named after them.
It's definitely a misnomer. Yeah.
I think we had 3 of these on the west side of our house when we bought the house.
You don't have them anymore, do you?
We've worked on them and I think they're gone.
Excellent. Well, there's more around Tecumseh, so
Oh,
we
yeah.
need to do more work. But again, you know, you cut it off and then you treat the stump to control it. Autumn olive, I hear, is popular with foragers. And the fruit is edible. It produces a ton of fruit, but
Yummy.
it's from Asia. So you want to weigh, is this plant more valuable to your landscape than the chokeberries or the serviceberry or any other number of native things that you can also eat the berries of. This was introduced in the US in the 1830s, so it's very well established. It leaves out early and retains its leaves late in the fall, so it's easy to spot because it has that longer growing season than the natives that we talked about. Mature trees can produce up to 30 pounds of fruit a year, which is a good thing, but that also yields about 66,000 seeds per tree. And it has a germination rate of over 70%. In areas that have cold winters, like here, germination rates exceed 90%. So that's why it's invasive. Again, you can pull the seedlings out easily when they're small. When it's bigger, you need to do the cut stump treatment. And last one here is Asian honeysuckle. This is something that is widespread throughout Indian Crossing Trails Park. One kind has red berries, one kind has dark purple berries. It was brought here in the 1800s as an ornamental, has escaped cultivation, and is taking over our wilderness areas. It's fast-growing and aggressive, and you must remove the entire root system if you're pulling it because it will regrow from any roots that are left.
And you have both a blueberry and a red berry?
There are 2 different varieties. I can't begin to say the Latin names, but one has red berries and one has the dark berries. It's still a honeysuckle and it's still not native and taking over our wilderness areas. So, almost done. If you're looking to identify your native plant, your invasive plants, MSU Extension has done a study of plant apps for 6 or 7 years now. Picture This has come in as #1 all 6 of those years. They also tested Plant Story, PlantNet, PlantIn, Google Lens, and iNaturalist. But as you can see, Picture This was the most accurate for all six years of this trial. And that's actually the one I use personally. And I have found it to be good with native plants and weeds. So it costs about, I think if you go, it's $8 a month or $30 a year or thereabouts. But it's pretty reliable. So, wrapping up with, we have some stewardship opportunities coming up at Kathy and Andy King's farm this weekend and next week, and then also this weekend and next week at Indian Crossing Trails Park. These are also on your resource sheet, so you don't really need to write them down. It's easy and it's very satisfying. You know, you think about, okay, pulling weeds doesn't really excite me, but you get to be out in the woods, you know, and it's easy to do because you just pull them up with bare hands and put them in a trash bag. It's not hard, and I highly recommend it. So on Saturday, I'm doing a double header because I have to pull garlic mustard at the park at 10, and then I'm going out to Lindisfarne in the afternoon to pull garlic mustard there. So I will have my fill of it by the end of the day.
Sometimes I find it helpful to give names to that I'm pulling,
Mhm.
it becomes a little therapeutic. Just saying.
Just say.
What a great idea.
Are they all Steve?
Don't use that name. There's some other names.
Sorry.
And finally, I want to give a plug to 2 books that I highly recommend. Some of you here are familiar with Doug Tallamy's book, Nature's Best Hope. I did a book club on it a year or 2 ago. This is all about why natives matter and how to get them into your yard. And highly recommend it. But this book just came out this year. This is someone who has taken Doug Tallamy's book and given you explicit directions on how to do all the stuff Dr. Tallamy recommends. You want to kill your lawn? There's a chapter for that. Yeah. Yep. Shrink the lawn, protect your habitat, change your outdoor lights. Yeah. So it's all here. So I highly recommend this book if you're trying to implement. Ruth?
There's another book that I just picked up that's, I find incredible. It's called Braiding Sweetgrass.
Oh yes, I'm familiar. It's beautiful.
It's a beautiful book, and, yeah, I highly recommend it.
Yeah. That same author also has a new book out called The Service Berry. It's a very tiny book. It's a real easy read.
I just
But-
bought that one.
Julie Conley is doing a book club on it through the Conservation District in May. So I'm going to be in on that. So look for that book also by the same author of Braiding Sweetgrass. So do you have any other questions at this point? Okay, I guess we're done.
Well, thank you.
Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it.